As I began thinking back to an experience that has prompted new knowledge, my mind immediately went to a conversation during my first day at Tradewinds Clubhouse. I introduced myself and began talking with a member, who I will call Dave. Dave was extremely social and was elated to have someone to talk to. His speech was pressured and tangential, which I had assumed was indicative of a hypomanic episode. He covered his favorite video games, movies, and snacks within the first few minutes of our conversation. While I enjoyed getting to know him and establishing rapport, I wanted to move toward the working phase of this nurse-client relationship. I suggested that we go outside and use the clubhouse bikes as we talked. It was a beautiful day, and I hoped to facilitate a therapeutic conversation about his experiences at Tradewinds. Without any probing, Dave began to share details of his life. He talked about his childhood trauma, his first psychotic break, as he called it, and his recent hospitalization. He told me about his father's incarceration when he was growing up and that he was constantly being bullied, verbally and physically. The phrases, "I'm sorry, that must have been hard," and "you didn't deserve to feel that way" came to mind. I was so focused on keeping the conversation going that I lost sight of my role in making meaningful and purposeful contributions. That afternoon, I submitted a process recording to my clinical instructor. I received a comment that read, "The comment you wrote, 'You don't deserve to be made to feel that way,' was a blocked communication, offering advice. We can talk about that later." At first, I wasn't sure I knew what she meant. My responses, while not excellent, seemed in line with how I would respond to anyone expressing hardships they have faced. As I continued to reflect, I realized that my conversation with Dave was not as valuable as it could have been. During our following clinical, my instructor gave us 2 handouts that outlined therapeutic techniques and nursing actions to communicate with hypomanic individuals. The following week, we covered a variety of therapeutic techniques and key elements of therapeutic relationships in lecture. As we progressed through the course and clinical component, the elements of therapeutic communication continued to come up and enhance my understanding. As outlined in the literature, common pitfalls in patient-provider communication are agreeing, giving unsolicited advice, and using approving or disapproving responses. When looking at these communication barriers, I understand that my comments displayed sympathy over empathy and gave my personal insight rather than working to explore his own. My focus on making sure the conversation didn't break caused me to overlook the objectives of therapeutic communication, which blocked the space for him to communicate his feelings and ideas. If this conversation with Dave were to occur again, I would approach it much differently. I would not be afraid to use silence, allowing him and myself the opportunity to process what to do or say next. The study, Silence is Golden, reviews 183 silence events during psychotherapy sessions. Researchers found that clients were more collaborative, emotional, and willing to share meaning after the use of silence. I would utilize the technique of active listening and offer general leads rather than interrupting him. Instead of, "I'm sorry," I would nod and use statements like, "I see," or prompt him to continue with, "You were saying?" I would follow up with open-ended questions, such as, "How did your childhood experiences make you feel?" Or, "Could you talk about how it felt growing up without your father at home?" I would encourage reflection by asking him, "How do you feel when participating at Tradewinds Clubhouse?" This experience with Dave and the continuous learning I've had in clinical and lectures has formed my new knowledge. The interactions we have with patients are immensely different from how we might converse with a friend or even a stranger. Our professional role pushes us to help patients navigate emotional and psychological distress, not just acknowledge it. By utilizing the fundamental skills of therapeutic communication, we are better able to provide patient-centered care.